Again.
This June 7th, 2021 regular meeting of the Mount Horeb Area School District's Board of Education shall come to order. Roll call, Jim.
Here.
Rod.
Here.
Diana. Here. Jeff.
Here.
Leah.
Here.
And Jessica. Shelby, has this meeting been properly noticed and certified?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. If able, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1B, Mr. Hayes, would you please read our mission statement this evening?
I would be very pleased to. The Mount Horeb Area School District, in partnership with the community, is dedicated to nurturing, educating, and challenging all students, preparing and empowering them to be productive, responsible, and self-fulfilled members of society.
Thank you. Item 2A, approval of the presented revised agenda. Are there any revision requests from the board?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion made by Leah and seconded by Diana to approve the agenda as presented. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Item 2B, approval of the May 17th, 2021 board meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Rod and seconded by Jeff to approve the May 17th board meeting minutes. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Okay.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Item 2C, approval of the May 27th, 2021 special board meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Jim and seconded by Jessica to approve the May 27th special board meeting minutes. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Item 3A, this month's student spotlight. Dr. Salerno, would you like to introduce our recipient?
We got a good one on our hands tonight. This is Gwen Mahoney. Good evening, Gwen. It's so nice
Hi.
to see you and your beautiful family. Gwen was selected by the high school administration, and I think members of our high school administration might be on the call. Am I correct? They might just be finishing up with a couple of activities outside tonight. I think we had soccer and softball going on. So allow me to do the special introductions. If you don't know Gwen Mahoney, and I don't know anyone who doesn't know Gwen, she's just got such a warm spirit about her. She is in everything and anything you can possibly imagine. Students, wouldn't you agree? I mean, she's in the musical, she's in the Club Interact, and whatever she touches in the name of doing good for people. And I think that's really why the high school staff saw her as being just an obvious choice for this auspicious award. And so, Gwen, we had a fun time on Thursday with your family, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah, who are those beautiful people with you right now next to you?
This is my brother Matthew, who is in 8th grade. This is my dad, John. This is my brother, Michael, who is a junior. And that's my mom, Lisa.
It's a delight to see all of you. Thank you for introducing them to us. Michael, of course, has a special place in our heart, too. And Matthew, I've got to take a few fashion cues from you. On Friday, you came to the dance in a pink suit. He looked stylish. You were looking great.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, that whole family is just comprised of some very special people, leave a positive imprint on our school district. You make us better, and we truly are grateful for that. We put Gwen's name and lights out front on the new sign as a small way of recognizing her for her time and her talents and her gifts. Truly, on behalf of our entire Board of Education, your high school, and this administrative team, we congratulate you on a job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Great school district to be a part of.
Gwen, I know that when you and I met this morning for Club Interact, you were chatting me up and telling me there's a bunch of people on the call tonight, friends and family. Can you introduce them here? I see them.
So Lori Locken, that's my aunt, and her son Jasper, he's my cousin. Janice Sievers, I work at Open House Imports with her. My grandma, Janice Meinholz, is here. And that might be it.
That's wonderful. We know that warm and kind people such as you, they get those gifts from their family. And so to your family, we thank you for all you've done to help shape our dear Gwen. Really, you do make us better. Well, thank you, Gwen. Thanks for being a part of this. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Gwen. Moving on to 3B school news. Time to hear from our student rep, Kate.
Hi, everybody. I just have a few quick things to share with you all tonight, as always. First off, I wanted to apologize for being unable to make the last meeting, as I have been very, very busy with soccer season. But first off, the class of 2021 graduated yesterday, and that is so exciting. And I just wanted to extend thanks for myself and my fellow classmates to all of the amazing district staff that has helped us along this journey. Second off, I've heard that there have been a lot of fun events to close out this year across the district, including Field Day at the IC, which apparently went very, very well. And finally, a lot of the high school spring sports are heading into playoffs, so be sure to stay tuned about those events to continue to support our Vikings. Thank you.
Board members, I want to tell you that Jessica and I had the pleasure of seeing Kate graduate yesterday. And I know that I speak for all of us when I say that her updates will really be missed. She is such a capable, thoughtful communicator, very professional, Kate. And part out to you. Dr. Salerno, any further school news you'd like to share?
Just one item, but may I just piggyback on the thoughtful comments you just raised. Kate is going to go to UC Berkeley in the fall. That is no easy feat. And so we are just wishing you only the very best and looking forward to you coming back and visiting us often. Yeah, I wanted to share with you that the school district, a number of our schools, the ELC, the PC, the IC, and the middle school received a really impressive award from the Positive Behavior Intervention Support System through Wisconsin RTI, Response to Intervention. It's an award that recognizes schools for their use of data in order to improve upon the services that we provide our kids around, in particular, helping kids with emotional behavioral disabilities and the like behavioral issues. They won an award for that. And we're very, very proud of the work that our staff has done to achieve this. Even without the award, we know that they just are just really gems, and we're grateful for the partnership we have with our families when we're addressing these sometimes less than positive phone calls. Kudos to them for their use of data to improve students' good work.
Thank you, board members. Any school news to share? All right, let's move on to item 3C, citizen comments. Due to our mixed format, those wishing to speak should text their first name, last name, and address to 608-250-9166. Again, that number is 608-250-9166. Dr. Salerno, are there any citizens signed up to speak?
Yes, we have 4 people who would like to visit with us tonight. The first person who texted was Sue Huntenberg. Good evening, Sue.
Good evening. My name is Sue Huntenberg, and I'm just wanted to make a brief statement on my support for the work done to update the human growth and development curriculum in the district. It appears comprehensive, well-researched, and ensures inclusion of all our youth. And I thank you for the commitment to acknowledge and affirm all our students in this curriculum. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sue. Next.
Thank you, Sue. And Julie Wilson, Pastor, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you, Steve? Good to see you. So I also wanted to just have a brief comment. I want to say thank you to the Human Growth and Development Committee for their work. I know a few people on the committee, so I was a little bit familiar. And then I was reading the article in the Mount Horeb Mail. And so I wanted to kind of echo what Sue said about, I just think it's so important that we let all of our students know that they matter and they're included. I have to confess that I was a little shocked when I read the article in the Mount Horeb Mail that we still separate the students by gender like they did when I was in middle school a long, long time ago. And, you know, I think as someone, a female in a male-dominated role, I think I'm really sensitive to things like that. And I think it's really important that we learn the same things together, men and women, about our bodies. And when we separate, it kind of maybe seems like something's wrong with one sex gender's body than another. So I think that's really important change that is in this proposal, and also about talking about it more often maybe than once or twice throughout the school year. So I really commend the committee for their work, and I really support this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Wilson. Next.
Hi, Brett. Brett Halverson's on the call tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a resident of the village and the father of a daughter who is finishing up kindergarten in 2 days. My comments tonight are also in support of the proposed updates to the Human and Growth Development Guide being considered. The proposed changes move us towards an evidence-based and science-driven approach in a complex and important subject matter. It's also incredibly important that consent be taught in schools while human growth and development curriculum. Teaching concepts of consent helps our kids grow up understanding their bodily autonomy and learning how to respect others as well. Most importantly, the proposed changes are inclusive and affirming of all students and show the school district's commitment to equity and decency. I thank you all for your work on this and urge you to pass them as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Halverson. Next this evening.
Yeah, last but not least for now, welcome to Amy Lyle. Good evening, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the space to talk tonight. And I just want to echo the previous comments and say thank you so much to all of the hard work that the committee did looking at the human growth and development curriculum. I know it was an even larger group than I anticipated, made up of such a cross section of our community. And I think that's so important. And I support this curriculum and encourage all board members to vote in favor of it. And I just wanted to share a little anecdote that we have a 7th grader who recently had a health lesson by CJ Martinson, our awesome nurse who is phenomenal. And CJ used some inclusive language in the lesson that she taught. And our kid came out of their bedroom, virtual learning, beaming. And there's not a whole lot that they talk excitedly about. They're kind of more of a shy person. They speak excitedly to their friends about video games. They were speaking to us excitedly about being affirmed and seen and heard and included. And man, it was just so amazing to see that. And it really was proof to me how much those words matter and how much that inclusive language matters. So I'm proud of our district to be taking this step, and just wanted to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lyle. Dr. Salerno, did any further comments come in?
No, not yet.
Last call for citizens' comments with a text to 608-250-9166. We also welcome citizens' comments at the end of our meeting. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4A, personnel transactions. Dr. Salerno, do you have any remarks?
Yes, there is an addendum tonight, board members.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Jeff, seconded by Rod to approve the personnel transactions with the addendum. All those in favor, say, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Item 5 of our consent agenda. Would any board members like to pull out letters A through C to remark individually?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Motion made by Leah and seconded by Rod to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All say nay. Motion passes. Moving on to our discussion items. Item 6A, our Exma student team research presentation. Mrs. Treader.
Right, so hello, I'm Erin Treader. I teach math and physics here at the high school. This is the wonderful XMAS team that we had this year. So XMAS is a program that we have to apply to. So it's an application that I put in last year in May for us to be a part of this program. They select 10 schools from the entire country to participate. And then those schools complete research with NASA scientists. So in conjunction with the NASA scientists, competing in this XMAS competition. So there were 10 schools in the country that started this program, and only 7 actually finished their research projects and got to the point at the end where they could present to the NASA judges. So we were one of the 7 who were able to do that. And just a little tidbit, they actually kind of did 4 separate projects and put it into one, whereas other schools, like kind of each one of the things that these students did could have been its own individual project. So they kind of took 4 projects and then combined that into one that they then presented. So I will let them take it from here and share their research with you. Dr. Salerno, can I just do the presentation for both?
Of course.
this one?
Yeah, if you want to use it just from the Chromebook, that'd be great, please. Thank you.
So we are Ethan Din, Inez Giles Tespreen, and Braden Schleip, and our project was called Insights on Lunar Features through Reference to Jupiter's Galilean Moons.
Well, background as to how we became interested was, well, after initial research, we became interested in the Galilean moons and the Earth's moons. We each focused on a separate moon. Conveniently, there were 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we compared our moon and our own chosen moon and their unique features and what we could learn from them.
Okay, for cratering, we turn to Callisto, the oldest, most heavily cratered surface in the solar system. Data on the moon's craters was obtained just through general research. There's plenty of data that's already been obtained through that. And cratering at Callisto was done by using this illustrated map here, measuring out the diameters of the cratering rims and classifying the crater types. Craters are classified 1 through 3, 1 being the most pristine and least weathered, and 3 being heavily weathered craters. Okay, so the results showed that most prominently, Callisto was filled with class 1 craters, those faded craters, but didn't have any class 3 ones. However, the moon showed a lot of the less faded craters and much less of the more pristine craters. But keep in mind that Callisto's data was obtained through much lower resolution photography. And because of that, those lower resolution craters aren't going to be picked up. Because keeping this in mind, we know that there are similarities between Callisto and the moon's cratering histories. We can use Callisto as a reference for the moon's history, being that it's the most heavily cratered atom in the solar system.
Okay, so for mine, I want to look more at seismic activity on Europa and comparing that to the moon. So when I was doing research, I had picked Europa because I had known a little bit about it because I did some research on terraforming. And so I wanted to pick Europa just because I knew a little bit more about it. And I actually, when I was doing my research, I was really impressed that there was seismic activity on the moon, which I had known there was probably going to be seismic activity on Europa because of the tectonic plates that we theorize it to have, which produce earthquakes on the Earth. And so I was a little bit disappointed because there's not a ton of research on or data on earthquakes on Europa. And so I took it in myself to propose a location to place a seismometer on Europa, which we have done on the moon several different times. So what I found out is that, well, unique to Europa, they have chaos terrains, which are these areas of lots and lots of seismic activity that are produced because of the cracks in the ice tectonic plates. And so I wanted to make sure when placing this hypothetical seismometer that we avoided that. So I ended up placing it in the Argonel Regio which is an area close to the equator, close to the equator, away from the chaos terrain, and also in this area where it's pretty flat and similar to the moon's surface, which I thought was important. And so in doing this research, I hope to collect, or in proposing this, I would hope to collect more research about Europa's quakes that it has and comparing those to the types of quakes that the moon has.
Magnetosphere and Ganymede, also the biggest of the 4 moons here. So why has Ganymede's dynamo lasted longer than the moon? Well, a core only consists of 2 elements, iron and sulfur. We can calculate that the moon's core, data from its core size and whatnot, would be roughly 3.5 volume percent. Well, yeah, 3.5% of its volume. While for Ganymede, it would be 14 volume percent if it were 3% sulfur, or 18 volume percent if it were 20% sulfur, because I found 2 kind of separate sulfur weight contents from my research for Ganymede. The graph at the below kind of shows a good comparison of the core sizes, with the very dark blue being the core, the lighter blue in the middle being the mantle density, the rock density, fraction, volume fraction, and then the light blue being the ice fraction. And if you notice, it's only for 2 of the rings because Ganymede has ice while the moon does not. That's here. Yeah, and that's assuming a 70% ice fraction for the both of Ganymede sulfur weight percents. And from these calculations, we can also calculate that Ganymede's ice fraction would be roughly 58 to 86% of its volume. And, well, depending on the core size, of course. So that allows us to conclude that the larger core size and the higher sulfur content of Ganymede's core contributes to its longer lasting dynamo.
And I studied volcanism on Io. Io is the most volcanically active body in our solar system, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to compare it to some of the lava flows that have happened on the moon and see if it could kind of be used as like a snapshot of what the moon looks like back when it was volcanically active billions of years ago. And before I get into it, I will say that this project for me, and I think I speak for all of us, was really about the process of research and, you know, needing to modify your research question or how you're going about it given the data that you have, and also just data processing. I learned so much about that. Okay, so this is a topographical map of Io, and it's really, really small on here, but all of the different colors represent different features, and I focused on sulfurous flow units, silicate flow units, and undivided flow units, which are basically just older flows. And what I did, similar to Braden, is I used a software called ImageJ, and I measured all of those to look at the distribution of area sizes. And so if you go to the next slide and show it, here are the histograms that I was able to produce. And so it shows the distribution of area sizes for these 3 different types of flows. And the silicate flows are most like the ones that would have been on the moon because of the lunar maria that's full of lunar basalt, which is higher in silicate content. And so I was kind of trying to do a comparison to see if there was a statistically significant difference between the types of flows. And I chose to look at it based on from like an area lens. But there's lots of other ways to go about it. You can do temperature, viscosity, composition, and this is just what was accessible to me. Because there are some studies that have been done on Io that show that Io might have ultramafic lava, but they've only gotten minimum temperature readings. So I was trying to go about the question in kind of a different manner. But from these histograms and from my statistical analysis, I wasn't able to find like a statistically significant difference. But my mentor really helped me find some interesting aspects of the data. And from that, you can see that a lot of these flows on Io are much, much smaller than those on the moon. And that's probably because the moon is much more representative of an accumulation of flows over a long period of time. And also, the one thing we were really excited about is that there is nothing as large as the Procellarum Basin, which is on the moon on Io.
Clearly, there is nothing in the universe as big as our thanks for Kelsey Preisel and Aaron Tretter. Thank you guys for helping us out through this project. It was a lot of fun and we're glad that we did it. We learned a lot.
Are there any questions?
I certainly don't have a question. I could try, I suppose, but I don't want to look stupid in the process. So I just want to compliment you guys on this work well done. You, like the Xmas group I was talking with Aaron before the meeting is one of the ones I always look forward to seeing come visit us. And you guys are just terrific. You're always so thoughtful and so smart. And just it's just a wonderful to see you make your presentation, to just see what kind of talent we have in this school. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Comments, board members, for our student scientists?
Just thanks for coming and presenting to us and showing us all this really interesting scientific data. I love it. It's fantastic to see.
And I wanted to add, this really strikes me as advanced collegiate level research. This sounds like grad students talking to us today. So please continue where your directions are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to Mrs. Treader.
So one last thing I will add, just looking to the future of this. So XMAS is the competition. We've done it 2 times now, since they only take teams from 10 different schools. They don't look at your application if you've already done it twice. So this program specifically is not something we're going to be doing for at least a little while. But they did, because of the wonderful work that our students do, they did approach me a few days kind of after the program was done, asking us to pilot a new program next year. So I will once again have a small group of students working on doing more of a moon mission concept study, trying to plan a mission to a particular crater on the moon. And so they will be the first people ever to look at this particular crater and planning a mission there. So it's really exciting endeavor for us to embark on next year.
This would not be possible without you, Erin, and thank you so much for your leadership. Each of you have blazed your own trail in developing a little niche of research that I think now will allow others to build upon your good work. You should be really, really proud of your efforts. Thank you. Onward, upward.
Great job, guys.
You came back after graduating and everything. Some of you.
Second time I've been in the building today.
You can't stay away, can you? Thank you. Appreciate all your efforts.
All right, on to item 6B, committee member reports. Mr. Hannah, your report for buildings and grounds.
Right. We met on May 24th at 5:30. And we established that fourth Monday and 5:30 will remain our time for our meeting. I volunteered for the chairman. We revised the policy 751.1, and the policy now has the registered home providers for 4K back to the way it was when it was first started. And that's a good thing. And that the process, as long as they have somebody that is 4K in their house, they will be picked up at their front door or sidewalk closest to their front door or their driveway, whichever how their house is laid out. And the rest of the policy pretty stayed the same as it was. And the building and grounds, we were down a custodian at the middle school, but we took care of that position tonight. But now in August, we'll be down a position at the IC. And we knew that was coming. But the cleaning stays on schedule as it always has been all year, keeping the rooms and protocols in place for cleaning. They continue to monitor the supplies for the cleaning to keep it safe in the buildings. And that some of the outdoor work is getting done, and there's a lot more outdoor work when school ends that will take place from the additional staff that we hired on. And that they're looking for 2 additional vehicles out of hopefully remaining dollars of their budget. New building and ground, different building and grounds van, and possibly a truck, as well as possibly a mower. This all depends upon dollars that are left over from this year's budget. The busing, we were told that a lot of the buses have a lot of old cameras in them, and they can't get pictures out on them very well, and they were just wanting to get rid of it all and get everything onto one system, and I'll put all the rest of them with all new cameras, and we'll be taking action on that later on tonight also. Brian also stated that during the course of his time of being here, he had noticed that nobody had taken off any students that had graduated or did their own, found their own way to school. So he was going to spend a lot of time this summer straightening that out on the routing changes, because most of our routes had over 110 people still riding the bus that only holds around 80 kids. So he was going to straighten that out. And his mechanics were getting going at getting the buses all up to shape, ready for inspection, which is coming up in early August. And he was the cameras. When he was talking to us about them, he wanted to get the cameras to go on the swing arm on the front bumper, but we also thought that maybe not put it there and put it actually on the stop sign, because it would get a better picture of the license plate of the person that would drive through. So this is, you know, something that we'll have to decide, and that he had decided on when he put this out to bid. And then the end of the meeting, that anybody that had anything to be discussed to get a hold of me or Scott DeYoung. Our next meeting date is June 28th at 5:30. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions or comments for Jeff? Deanna, Mrs. Rotham, your report for finance.
We met on May 10th as a finance committee, 2 new members on that committee at this time. So that was the first meeting for both of them. We decided that the meetings would continue to meet on the second Monday of each month at 5:30. Jessica was appointed the new chair of the finance committee as the new treasurer of the board. We also were very excited to welcome Michelle Dank to come and talk about our food service program. And she talked specifically about 2 topics. One was the school program's emergency operational cost reimbursement program, which, as you'll remember, this federal program has allowed us to get funds from the federal government to bolster our food service program in case we took a setback from the pandemic. The application process between the state and federal government is occurring right now. The approval has not yet been determined. We also talked about the nationwide waiver extension, and this program allows for free lunches for all students throughout the end of the school year. It has also been extended through June 30th, and we will be offering the opportunity for our students to have meals that they will pick up through June 30th at this point. And if we have sufficient participation in that this summer, we might look into continuing that free meal pickup through the entire summer. But that is yet to be determined. The committee also reviewed the taxes that were received. You'll remember our last tax receipt occurs in August, so we will discuss that again then. We then reviewed the budget calendar, an important date since we had 2 new board members that were part of the committee. And our next meeting is scheduled for June 14th at 5:30.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Questions or comments for Diana? Moving on to Mrs. Lipska, your report for safety and wellness.
Yeah, so we met on May 17th, and I was elected chair again. We'll keep our meeting date and time the same, the third Monday of each month at 6. We talked about our next 3 months and what we're gonna review, which will be the Dane County Youth Risk Survey results, hopefully. In July, we're going to talk about at-risk student planning, and in August, we'll talk about the SRO data. Megan Miller, who's a social worker in our district, came in, presented to us, and it's amazing how much stuff they can get done with how many kids that they are seeing. We talked about the mental health grants and a pending lawsuit against vaping, which we'll be discussing later, I'm pretty sure. We do not have the Dane County risk assessment updates yet, so that's why I said hopefully we'll be talking about it. Otherwise, it might get pushed out another month. We also talked about the updating the dress code policy, which you will see. We'll also talk about that tonight, I believe. And that was it. Our next meeting will be June 21st, but then our July meeting will be a joint meeting with education. That is my report.
Thank you, Leah. Questions or comments for Leah? Moving on to item 6C, Wisconsin School Budgeting Learning Opportunity for the board and community. Fund balance and cash flow, borrowing with our favorite professor of finance, Mr. Scott DeYoung.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, for that introduction. Thanks for having me again, everybody, this evening. This presentation tonight is really the next topic of a series of discussions that we've had and will be having regarding school finance. And so I appreciate the opportunity for continued learning. Quick recap. Back on April 5th, a couple months ago, we had a brief discussion and had a presentation regarding revenue limits. And then last month, in the month of May, the Community and Legislative Engagement Committee met and had discussion with John Humphreys regarding some school finance topics and revenue limits as well. So again, thanks again for having me as we continue on in our navigation through school finance in this series that we're taking on. So thanks again. Our topic tonight is called Fund Balance and Cash Flow. Thought it would be a wise topic to discuss because sometimes it's easy for folks outside of the business office to merge those two topics together. And I think it's important for us to remember that fund balance is something that's different from cash flow. And so tonight we'll talk about 2 areas. We'll talk about the basics of fund balance, what it is, how we calculated it. And then secondly, we'll talk about cash flow and specifically what that does for our district. And we'll talk about the calendar in terms of how we receive our funds throughout the fiscal year. So the first item, as I mentioned, is we'll talk about our fund basics. So specifics of fund balance. So for those of you that aren't familiar with school finance, our accounting system is built on a series of funds. And so we follow an accounting program through the Department of Public Instruction. All public school districts follow the same accounting system. Purpose of doing that is for reporting purposes. So when we report data to DPI and other districts report data to DPI, they're able to draw similarities and comparisons. So within the accounting system, we have various funds, and each fund is given a number. So for those of you that work in the district or are familiar with school finance, you may have heard of Fund 10. Fund 10 is our general operating fund. It's where the vast majority of our business activity takes place. We also have many other funds, and another one that I pointed out on the slideshow is Fund 27, which is our special education fund. Now, each fund has its own set of accounting records, sort of an A and a B. And so the A is balance sheets. So within a balance sheet in a particular fund, we have assets, we have liabilities, and we have a fund balance. And we'll talk in a little bit more detail on balance sheets in just a second. We also have revenues and expenditures. And for those of you that are on the board, every year we talk about our budget, right? We do budget forecasting. We look at our revenues. We anticipate what our expenditures could look like, and that's our budget. So that's sort of our step 2. So we will go to the next slide now, and we'll take a look at balance sheets. So as I mentioned, balance sheets are made up of assets, liabilities, and the fund balance. Each fund has a fund balance. And so we'll start at the top here with assets. Assets are things that are resources of ours that we own as a district. So those are things like cash that we have in our bank accounts. We also have accounts receivable. These are IOUs. These are obligations that we will receive as a school district from outside entities. And they're, again, considered assets because they are resources that we have ownership in. On the other hand, liabilities are things like accounts payable, our invoices that the Board of Education pays and approves every couple of weeks. Those are things that we owe out, so those are liabilities. The concept of fund balance is really just an accounting equation of assets minus liabilities. Our financial software adds up all of our assets, subtracts off our liabilities, and that's called our fund balance. For those of you that may have taken Accounting 101 back in the day, they may have called it owner's equity, for example. So we call it fund balance. So it's a math equation of assets minus liabilities. So that second item that I mentioned after balance sheets is budget. And of course, as we know, budgets are made up of both revenues and expenditures. In parentheses, I have a few examples. What are revenues for us? Well, our 2 main sources of revenue, of course, is our state support. We call it state aid. We also have property taxes that our local community supports us with. And then we have a variety of other types of revenue, such as grants. We receive numerous grants every year from both the state and federal governments, as well as every once in a while from some private sources. And then, of course, we have our expenditure side of the house, and these are things like personnel or labor, supplies, services, equipment, etc. Next slide. Thank you, Steve, by the way, for doing this. So one of the questions that comes up is, well, gosh, how is a fund balance created? Well, a common misconception at times is that fund balance is simply cash. And while we know that that's not the case, fund balance is certainly made up of cash. And so again, just as a reminder of how we calculate a fund balance using our balance sheet, it's simply assets minus liabilities. One might say, well, gosh, how is a fund balance created in terms of year after year? Sometimes it might go up, sometimes it might be go down. What causes that? And that's where the budget comes in. If we see that revenues are greater than expenditures at the end of a particular fiscal year, we'll find our fund balance will go up. And on the opposite end, if we find that our expenditures are greater than our revenues at a particular time, such as at the end of a fiscal year, then we'll see that our fund balance will decrease. So every year we'll find fund balance increase or decrease depending on the activities during the year. And then that will carry forward to the next year. And over the course of time, you'll see a trend of what's happening with our fund balance. So what does fund balance mean? We talked about how we calculate it, but what's the purpose? And I think it's important for us to recognize that fund balance really helps define the financial health of a district. And we'll talk about this in just a second when we look at some policy things, but we really benefited tremendously by having a stable fund balance when it came time to go to borrowing after the referendum was approved a few years ago. We go through a series of calls with rating agencies, and our rating agency was Moody's at the time, and they look at a lot of things that go on in the district, financial operations, the stability of fund balance, enrollment, the county and the school district tax base, and so forth. And so fund balance really was an important component of our positive rating that we received. And again, why? Because fund balance really is defining one area of the financial health of our district. Sometimes fund balance can be defined as a percentage of the fund's total expenditures. And so when we talk about fund balance, typically we're talking about our general operating fund, which is Fund 10. And so as a percentage, we'll take our ending fund balance at the end of each fiscal year, and we'll divide it by our total expenditures for that given year, and we'll come up with a percentage. And our percentage for this past fiscal year in 1920 was just under 25%. And so a person might wonder, what's the recommended amount that fund balance should be? In the next slide, you'll find that one of the areas that we like to look to is the Department of Public Instruction. DPI really does oversee a lot of things that we do, of course. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we do a lot of reporting to DPI using that standard accounting system. And so DPI actually does not make a recommendation on the appropriate size of fund balance. You know, they won't say you need to have 15%, 25%, 30%. They don't make a recommendation, but what they do suggest is the 3 bullet points that you'll see on the screen. And the first one that DPI will say is that adequate fund balance can avoid excessive short-term borrowing, therefore avoiding associated interest costs. Now, we'll talk about cash flow in just a minute, but that's what number 1 is getting at. Number 2, accumulate sufficient assets to make designated purchases or cover unforeseen expenditure needs. So this might be something like, you know, a school has a boiler go down and we don't have it in the budget and it was unexpected. A district may say, okay, we're going to need to increase our expenditures greater than our revenues in a given fiscal year to compensate for that boiler repair. As a result, one would say on paper that we had adequate fund balance, we had adequate cash, and thus adequate fund balance to be able to cover that expense. So that's just an example. And then the last bullet that DPI says is a strong fund balance will demonstrate financial stability and therefore preserve or enhance its bond rating, therefore lowering debt issuance costs. And that's what I was referring to earlier with our rating calls that we had. So I wanted to just briefly share with you and remind our Board of Education what our current school board policy is for fund balance. It's policy number 662.3. It's called General Fund Balance Management. And real quickly, I'll just share the 3 bullets that are pretty consistent with what DPI shares. We reviewed this policy just a few years ago. The first bullet says that general fund operating reserve, otherwise known as fund balance, provides within its cash balances adequate working capital sufficient to meet the district's cash flow requirements. And again, we'll talk about cash flow in a minute. The second bullet says it functions as a safeguard against unanticipated expenditures, like what I just described as an example with the boiler. And then the third item addresses demonstrating fiscal responsibility, and again, assisting with rating calls. So we actually wanted to stay fairly consistent with what DPI's recommendation was as the overseeing authority for our district. Now, the bottom paragraph states that we're going to make an attempt as a school district to develop an operating budget that will add sufficient funds to the general fund balance and maintain a minimum of 15% as of June 30th of each year. So you'll see that we're above that 15%. Now, 15% doesn't necessarily mean that a district's not going to cash flow borrow. But what it does do is if we get below 15%, that draws some concern, especially from rating agencies when you see something dipping below that. So we had a minimum of 15%, but certainly we're in a strong, stable place, being at just under 25%. Next slide, please. So the part two of this presentation is to talk about cash flow. So if you'll recall in the balance sheet, cash is one asset that makes up the balance sheet. But cash itself, as you all know, is what pays our bills. Fund balance does not. There are times of the year if I paid attention to strictly our fund balance and not our cash flow, there may be some issue because, again, fund balance is made up of many other things. So we pay attention to our cash flow, similar to what you would do at home. When you have paychecks coming in and bills going out and so forth, you have to pay attention to your cash flow. So we do the same thing here. So as you can imagine, cash flow is impacted by budget transactions that occur throughout the year, payroll, paying invoices, and so forth. Each month, second bullet here, as you know, the district pays expenditures and it receives revenues, and we record those things accordingly in our software. Sometimes we have larger revenues in certain months than others. And so when that happens, we'll find that we'll have more cash on hand during those times than at other times. And we'll take a look at a modified calendar here in just a second. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned a number of times, and I know for those of you on the Board of Education that served on the Finance Committee, this will be a good review for you. But we have two major sources of revenue within our school district. And of course, as I mentioned before, that's state aid and property taxes. We receive that revenue, though, at various times throughout the year. So it's not like we receive our state aid, 1/12 every month consistently throughout the year. And then the same thing with property taxes. There's very specific times that we receive them. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to just show everybody what the calendar looks like for when we receive state aid. And again, this is our major source of support from the state of Wisconsin. There's 5 months during the fiscal year, and our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. 5 months during the fiscal year that we receive our state aid: September, December, March, June, and July. One thing I just wanted to point out to you is we actually receive a very small amount of state aid during the month of July. But that aid is actually due to us from the prior fiscal year. And so while we recognize it in our budget, the prior fiscal year, the actual cash for that 5th month doesn't take place and is not received until the month of July. So that's the difference sometimes between paying attention to the budget and then paying attention to cash flow. We're recognizing that revenue in one fiscal year, but we're not actually receiving the funds until the month after the fiscal year ends. Next slide, please. The next item is property taxes. So we talked about state aid, those 5 months that we receive funds. For our property tax receipts, we have 4 months that we receive funds. The month of January, February, April is a very small amount. It's actually part of the lottery credit. So it's a very small amount relative to our other property tax receipts. And then the month of August. And this is another important point to make. We recognize all of our tax levy in the fiscal year that is adopted by the Board of Education. However, we don't receive every dollar of that tax levy during the fiscal year. In fact, we probably usually between 70 and 75% of our property tax receipts occur in the months of January, February, and April. The other 25 to 30% is not actually received. The funds are not actually received until the month of August. So about 2 months after the fiscal year is ended. So again, recording it in the budget is important. We recognize it in the budget. We just don't receive all of the dollars during that particular fiscal year. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to do here is I wanted to consolidate and take our state aid calendar dates and our property tax calendar dates and merge them together so you can sort of see a little bit larger picture. And there's two areas that I just want to point out to folks, which I think is important for school districts to note. And that is during the month of September, you may recall August, we just received that final tax payment from that previous fiscal year. So cash flow is coming in. The month of September, school has started. We're now in our new fiscal year. We're receiving a state aid amount in the new fiscal year in our new budget in September. But then you'll find a space. The month of October and the month of November, there's not a lot happening in the revenue side of the house until we get to the first Monday in December when we get a significant state aid payment. So for a school district that may not have enough cash flow on hand, may not have enough fund balance in its books, it may find itself struggling to meet some of its obligations when it gets time to around Thanksgiving, the latter part of November, until that first Monday in December. What some school districts will do, and we've been fortunate, we haven't done this for many, many, many years, is they actually find themselves needing to borrow money from a financial institution, a bank, to be able to bring in some additional cash flow to meet their obligations. Then once we get into the turn of the calendar year, we get to January and February. Right back, Steve, to that. Yep, thank you. Once we turn the calendar year to January, January, February, March, you'll see a pretty consistent flow of funds coming in. After we get through the month of March, even though it says April property tax, that April property tax bill or receipt is actually fairly minimal as compared to the entire levy. So April and May and the beginning of June become very tight for districts from a cash flow perspective again. The reason being is this: unlike that December payment, which is the first Monday of the month, the June payment actually does not occur for state aid receipt until the third Monday in June. And there's a lot happening at the end of a school year, which is the first couple of weeks of June. And so for some school districts, again, that may be struggling with adequate fund balance, they may find themselves having a cash flow issue when they get into the months of April, May, and the first half of June. And then once they get their aid payment in June, then they're starting to see some funds coming in again when we turn into the latter part of the summer. So I point out those, not that it's a significant issue for us right now, but nevertheless, from a public school situation across the state, that Thanksgiving time and that late springtime can be challenging sometimes for districts. And then the last slide is I just have a conclusion here for the board, and thanks for bearing with me as I go through these items. I have just sort of three summary sort of conclusion points. The first one is just a reminder that fund balance is the result of an accounting equation, and it'll increase and decrease each year dependent on if revenues are greater than expenditures or less than expenditures. As we discussed, fund balance is not cash. Cash is actually one component of our balance sheet. And therefore, the last bullet here, it's important for a school district to recognize its cash flow and not only fund balance when it's managing its monthly business operations. And again, the attempt here was simply to be able to separate what fund balance is from cash flow, because it does have an impact on our month-to-month business operations. So I'll stop there and I'll open it up certainly to any questions that folks might have for me.
And I think that signals that once again, you've done a very thorough job for us. Thank you so much. We are fortunate to have you leading us through these complexities of school finance.
Thank you.
Let's call for questions for Scott.
Well, let me just say thank you. If you are thinking of something yet, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And we talk about things from time to time at the finance level, but to be able to do it at the full Board of Education level and to be able to share it with our community is something I'm appreciative of. So thank you.
Scott. We'll move on then to action item 7A, public hearing and consideration to amend the COVID-19 district flexibility waiver application. Dr.
I think Board President Saylor said it best as we planned our meeting a couple of days ago. This is really some cleanup as it relates to some language that the board previously approved. You may remember that the board was asked if they could please consider 1-year temporary stay on in educator effectiveness activities. After we completed the document and sent it on, they updated the form, they meaning the DPI, to add in that part that you see here on my screen and on your screens too, to say, hey, if you do educator effectiveness, you also need to check this box. And so we're asking for the board's consideration, the public's consideration, if there's any comment that the public would like to make with regard to this. It is in keeping with the board and the administration's intent when we completed this document. I think we did that in September or October.
Dr. Salerno, would you like me to open up the floor to citizens' comments then?
Please, yes, please, in case there's anybody who had a question or had a thought on this.
Yes. Open up the floor for citizens' comments to fulfill the public hearing requirement. For our usual format, those wishing to speak on this topic should text their first name, last name, and address to 608-250-9166. Again, that number is 608-250-9166 on the waiver application.
Not seeing anything yet.
Last call for citizens' comments on the waiver application to fulfill the public hearing requirement. Number to text is 608-250-9166. Thank you. Then I'll now entertain a motion to approve the amendment to the COVID-19 district flexibility waiver application. Motion made by Leah and seconded by Diana to approve this amendment. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion passes. The waiver amendment is approved. Item 7B, consideration of the budgeted bus camera. Back to Scott DeYoung.
Well, good evening, everybody again. We have an opportunity tonight, as Mr. Hanna mentioned earlier this evening, to consider, to ask the board to consider the purchase of a new bus camera system in each of our school buses. While I'm fortunate to introduce this topic, I certainly can't take credit for it. Brian Toth and his incredible transportation team have done a tremendous job, not only planning a year ago to budget for this purchase, but then also to be able to work through some of the options, especially once kids return to school here in the spring, to be able to determine a system that would be most effective for us in a variety of ways. The Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee, as Mr. Hanna mentioned, not only reviewed the quotes, but had a pretty good discussion with Brian Toth, not only about the necessity, but then also just talking about what it can do for us in the future in terms of transportation and bus safety. So we would be asking for the board's consideration tonight. The quotes that are in front of you show that Nelson's is the lowest quote.
Motion to approve Nelson bus service for the quote.
Second.
Motion made by Jeff and seconded by Rod to approve the Nelson's bus camera purchase. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. The bus camera purchase is approved. Item 7C, a second reading of the Human Growth and Development Guide. Mrs. Straka.
I'm on mute, sorry. Thank you very much. So yeah, this is the second reading of this plan. As was mentioned by some of our citizen comments and in the previous board meeting, we had a collective body of citizens and staff and students come together to create a plan over the past about 6 months. What you have before you is the proposed plan. And then we also included another copy that is a red line with some of the comments or some of the wonders and suggestions from one of our board members the last meeting as well. So that's why you have 2 versions in board docs. The original version that was submitted for board consideration, and then another version with a couple red lines in there, acknowledging some of the wonders of one of our board members. So we would be looking for your direction and potential approval for a human growth and development plan tonight that we can then continue planning over our summer months to implement next school year.
To approve. Second.
May I ask for clarification to approve the original version or version 2, please?
The second one that she's presenting this evening.
Was that Diana that seconded?
We actually both did at the exact same time. So that one, paper, scissors.
Right. Motion made by Jessica, seconded by Diana to approve the Human Growth Development Guide version 2. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes. The Human Growth and Development Guide is approved. Item 7D, a second reading of policy 347, student records. Dr. Salerno.
Board members, this is a second reading of the policy that was put forward through the Education Committee. In essence, the reason why we're asking the board's consideration here tonight is because of some new language that's found in a recently authorized Federal Defense Act. It's called the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, which requires school districts to provide families with district-sponsored email accounts to provide the U.S. government with district-sponsored email accounts for recruiting purposes. Families can opt out through our online registration process, and we're in the process of figuring out how to effectuate that, assuming that this policy is effectuated. And then lastly, you may recall that the first paragraph of the policy, which was kind of nebulous, the team thought it was best just to maybe remove that and just get right into the policy. So thank you for your consideration.
Okay, go for
Second.
Motion made by Diana, seconded by Jeff to approve the changes to policy 347. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Will say nay. Motion passes. Policy 347 is approved. Item 7E, first reading, consideration of revised policy 751.1, bus routing and scheduling. Mr. Dion.
Hello, everybody. We had an opportunity over the last couple of months to work in depth with the Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee, as well as folks in the community that are registered daycare providers to not only take a look at the policy as it currently stood, but then talk about the needs that the providers had, and in conjunction with our great transportation team, come up with an opportunity to find a solution for creating a service for our daycare centers that they have an opportunity to provide the meaningful care that they give the children. And so the purpose of the policy was to do some basic cleanup work, but then really to get into the heart of what Mr. Hanna mentioned earlier in his summary of the minutes, to be able to provide transportation, pickup and drop off in front of the registered daycare sites. And so again, on behalf of that committee, thank you to not only the committee members, and I know some board members also joined us during those conversations, but then also to the community daycare sites that provided insight and input into this as well. And so the change in summary would be simply to provide a pickup and drop off in front of the registered daycare provider locations. And we'd be looking for, I know this is a first reading, but we would be looking for the board to consider making the change as presented.
Board members, questions or comments?
I have a question. So there's another change though, right? So we used to have somebody there for 4K for drop off. And be dropped off to a responsible adult. And that is gone now. It's just for midday. Am I reading it right?
I think the expectation is that we would continue to encourage to have, somebody available, being that we're dropping off right in front of and picking up right in front of the location certainly makes it significantly better for our sites.
But that's just the midday routes, right? So in the morning they have to, if I'm reading this right, in the morning they have to walk up to a half mile to meet the bus. And then after school, they'd have to walk up to a half mile to get dropped off to go home. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. I feel like it's a little more substantial than dropping off at the daycare sites. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the policy.
I think the intent of some of the cleanup was to find some of the commonalities between in district or in village and out of village, to be able to make those similarities together and then separate wherever there's differences. I don't think it was the intent of the committee to make any significant change other than the daycare item that's being addressed. And I would look to another committee member or Brian Toth, who's on the call, if you see something differently. But as Dr. Salerno put up on the screen there, you'll see the importance of having an adult present.
If they're not present, one of the things that we just did was we took the language from below and we moved it up to say, we're going to take the student back to the bus garage. The half mile piece was and always has been, to my understanding, the students being able to walk up to half mile is for people who live outside the village of Mount Horeb. That's the reason why I think the board established that policy that allows for transportation in town. So I appreciate you asking the question. I think it's there. It's just in a different spot now.
It is, and I was reading the outside the village as the in the village. I was swapping them in my mind. So thank you for that.
It happened.
Further questions or comments about this policy 751.1?
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion made by Leah, seconded by Jessica to approve the changes to policy 751.1. Further discussion? If this is the first reading, all board members are in attendance. We can pass this on a roll call vote this evening. Diana?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Changes to policy 751.1 are approved. Item 7F, first reading, policy 443.1, dress code. Mr. Johnson.
And I'll be taking the place of Mr. Johnson this evening. His little boy is having his birthday tonight. And so we wanted him to be able to celebrate. And I don't think there's anything too big coming out of this discussion, as it's something that the middle school faculty and staff, along with our student government, have thought about. Our kids, when we set high expectations for them, they rise to the occasion, and this is an example of that. Wearing hats, apparently, at the middle school level is very important, including sometimes wearing our hoodies that come with our sweatshirts. Our students have done such a wonderful job this year being responsive to the needs of our dress code protocols. And this has not been an issue for our students at all. In fact, they've taken to the expectation and done a very nice job of it. And this was a way in which the faculty and staff of the middle school wanted to thank and reward our middle school students. And so you'll see here a policy revision that would allow our young middle school students to wear hats as well as wear hoodies if they'd like at school.
To approve. Motion made by Leah and seconded by Diana to approve the changes to the dress code. Further discussion? Again, as this is a first reading and all board members are in attendance, we can pass this on a roll call vote tonight. Jessica?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
Rod?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Changes to policy 443.1 are approved. Item 7G, consider joining litigation regarding national school district vaping. Dr. Salerno?
Yes, good evening again, board members. I was speaking with some colleagues around the state and then again nationally now. I'm learning that there is an effort underfoot in order to join in litigation nationally against vaping firms. And I use just the example of Juul as being one of them. For the purposes of obtaining dollars that can be used in school districts to teach kids about the dangers of e-cigarettes and vaping tools. They've become quite prolific in our schools and in schools, quite frankly, around the country. And I think if you talk to some students, they would tell you that they don't think it has any harm to them because they can't see the vapors. It's just different for them. And I think we are interested in joining at no financial impact to the school district in joining in this litigation that if we were to receive something from this, some award for this, we would put that to use for purposes of educating kids through health class and the like. And so there's no money if no money to be paid on the part of the district in the event that this effort is not successful, but there is an ability to really gain something for our kids as a result. And so we're asking for the boards, please, to consider in joining in this national litigation.
Questions or comments, board members?
How long is the litigation expected to take?
There is a pipeline backup right now in a lot of litigation. We don't have a feel for this. They're in the process right now of trying to find districts that would be interested in participating in this. So I apologize, Mr. Heiss. I don't have a real understanding as to how long it might take, but it could take a significant amount of time.
I don't want to make too much of a project out of this, but knowing what we do about the length of time it may take to get to some settlement or some verdict or judgment, have we explored other options for like grants or other kinds of things to educate kids about the same subjects? Because I also, if we don't know how long it's going to take, I also assume that we don't know what the estimated payment.
You're right. We don't have an understanding as to what that amount would be, but fear not. We have applied for a number of grants, and in fact, an annual grant that the board has is something called the Alcohol Tobacco Grant, Drug-Free School Grant. And there we receive about $13,000 annually, and we spend that in education for our students. And I'm pleased to remind the community that the district received a sum of about $72,000 for school safety, awareness, wellness, mental health kinds of things through Dane County. And so we're one of few school districts here in Dane County that received those dollars, and we embedded in our grant education and professional development of staff as well. So this would not be the sole means. This would be an enhancement too.
I know we've got a long agenda. I want to apologize to my colleagues, but so what do we give up? I mean, what are we giving? It's clearly got to be giving away something if we're letting other people litigate a complaint for us. So what are we giving up?
Yeah, so there are attorney fees, and in the letter that you'll see that we've attached, there are attorney's fees that would be taken out of the initial award, if any.
Right.
That would be something we'd be giving up. But in terms of looking at it, a net loss ratio, we would only stand to gain if awarded, and we have nothing to lose.
Thanks.
And this was a good conversation at our Safety and Wellness Committee as well as our Education Committee. I appreciate the thoughtful comments tonight. I know it can be confusing. To the extent to which I can help with this, I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve joining this litigation.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion made by Jessica and seconded by Leah to approve joining litigation on National School District vaping. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Say nay. Motion passes. Our participation in the litigation is approved. Item 7H, consider alteration to the gradual reopening plan, student masking indoors, summer 2021. Dr. Schler, do you have any further updates for us here?
Yeah, if it helps you any, in the public comments section of tonight's board meeting, I took some notes that I thought might be of help to you that I had from a call with Public Health Madison-Dane County this past Thursday morning. And we continue to see some very favorable numbers, both in hospitalizations, deaths, as well as contact of the virus. And we're also seeing continued increases in the vaccination rate for folks, though that has begun to stabilize a bit. I'm pleased to tell you that this next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, we'll have our next vaccination clinic for our students who are age 12 and over. So we'll have even more students receive the vaccine and have the full course of the vaccine. The rub for us comes in is that when you think about the age of sixth graders, some of them are 11 and some of them are 12. And so what might we do in a summer school program? That's what this topic is about tonight. In terms of masking for the kids during summer school. Because the children aren't vaccinated yet, I can appreciate at the younger levels, I can appreciate how some might be concerned about what we might do. And so we're just looking for some direction from the board tonight about how they'd like us to handle our K-8 indoor summer school program. As well as, kids attending camps and weight rooms and these sorts of things, especially if they've been vaccinated. I hope that sets the table for the discussion here tonight.
Board members, questions and comments?
We can start. The bulk of, I think, the students who are going to be in the buildings this summer will be our students who are participating in summer school, who, as we all know, are our younger students. Most of them will be under 12 and have not been vaccinated yet. And we also know that summer school is a very limited, short period of time. So that if they were to get sick or even exposed and having to be quarantined and had to move out of summer school, they lose this very limited opportunity, which is the intent is to catch them up, to prepare them for next year. And then as Dr. Salerno just said, some of the students may be vaccinated, some may not at the middle school. So in my opinion, for our younger students who have not yet been vaccinated, they should wear masks. And then at the middle school, just sort of to make the playing field equal, so that students don't feel you know, oh, I have to wear a mask, but he doesn't have to wear a mask, that kind of thing. Just make it so that everyone wears masks right now. We can reassess in the fall. I know that, you know, the CDC guidelines say that to continue masking for the 2021 school year. They don't really give guidance for summer school, but they do give guidance for indoor summer camps. And that does state that for non-vaccinated students, mask use is strongly encouraged for people who are not fully vaccinated, including children. So at this point, I guess my thought is for these younger students and the mixed, you know, 11, 12-year-olds at the middle school, for summer school purposes, they should wear masks.
Thank you, Jessica. Other comments, questions from board members, please?
We have no order in place now, correct? The public health department, there is not an order that would require even an unvaccinated child from wearing a mask, correct? And I don't want to begin. Well, here's where there's no order, and we've been told for a long, long time that we need to follow the science. And if we're going to follow the science, then it shouldn't be a requirement. It certainly could be a recommendation, but it shouldn't be a requirement. And while I do have some sympathy to with vaccinated versus unvaccinated, I mean, part of the reason why adults, if I could draw an analogy, why adults have been encouraged to be vaccinated is exactly for that reason. So they don't have to wear a mask. That has been like the chief argument for being vaccinated. Not only are you going to be healthier, of course, but you won't have to wear a mask. So I think our kids have been through an awful lot. I think there's not an order in place that would require them to wear that mask. That is the science as our public health department sees it now. That could certainly change and we would have to revisit it, but that is the science as a relatively aggressive public health department sees it as we sit here now. So I can't support a requirement for masking K to 8 at summer school this year, I'm afraid.
Other questions or comments, board members?
So Dr. Salerno, I don't see in your notes anything regarding what public health is obviously not recommending, but requiring, or recommending versus requiring. Do they have any sort of feedback on this topic?
Yes. So they are not requiring masking. However, they are recommending masking indoors for individuals, all individuals, and trying to maintain physical distancing as much as possible. That's the recommendation. And that's where the rub, I think, comes in, because our graduate reopening plan says not only are we going to follow the requirements, but we're also going to look at those recommendations too.
Comments from other board members, questions?
I would contend we strongly need to follow the science. We look at the people that are attending this public building. I would say summer school is a fraction of the number of people who are in the building at any given day. If you look at all of the other camps, activities, of course, summer school is a large portion, but I think just summer school itself is a small fraction. And as Rod said, if we follow the science, the student who enters this public building can go to any other public building in the community and not have to wear a mask. When it comes to our public school and has to wear masks. That I can't support that.
So, Dr. Salerno, that's a good point. Can you give us an estimate of the number of students that will be in the buildings outside of, I mean, obviously there's summer school. Is that the larger portion of the number of people who will be in our buildings?
That's exactly right. And those students will be spread out in two different buildings, right? The intermediate center and then the middle school. And then we'll have kids here at the high school, but not for academics, but for participation in more camps and things. So all of our buildings will be used, but it'll be at a far less number of students than we would typically see in the building at any time of day. And that time typically for summer school will be between about 8 o'clock in the morning, about 11:30, 11:45.
Dr. Salerno, do you have an approximate a number of students that are participating in summer school?
We don't, but I could get that for you. In fact, maybe could I ask Sarah Straka? I know she might be on the call. Sarah, do we happen to have our latest numbers?
Yeah, I would say, I was just doing a quick estimate on my calculator without looking at it. I would say we have probably about 200 kids at the intermediate center. So that's a third of the building if we look at a normal school year. And at the middle school, we would have about 60 kids, maybe a little more than that.
I guess another concern that I would have is that registration has already closed. Parents have agreed to sending their students. This year, summer school is invite only. So those students who really need to get caught up, and that if any parents then decided that they were going to withdraw their students because of the masking. No one's going to withdraw if they are required to wear a mask, but some students may withdraw if there are no masking requirements. And I just don't want to lose any of our students who need to get caught up.
I agree with that, Jessica. I don't think we could say with certainty that we'll lose students for having to wear a mask.
It's true. It's just a possibility.
I'm getting old. Is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah.
Make a motion that our K-8 summer school students are required to wear a mask.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Motion made by Jessica and seconded by Jeff to continue for our K through 8 students to wear masks for summer school. Further discussion?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is that the intent to also then maybe have the high school kids who've been vaccinated, they would not need to wear a mask, or is that something that is yet to come in a future motion?
I guess I was thinking K-8 in terms of summer school and then the camps that might be happening, those age ranges. That's what my intent was.
Jessica, you haven't said so, I don't think, but did you mean assuming that this passes, do you mean that this requirement should continue after summer school or sunsets at the end of?
Summer school only.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, please.
So I think we have to include any activity or anything that the building is open for. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'll clarify. Any K-8 activity, those students should wear masks, is what my motion is.
Indoors.
Indoors. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I should have.
Within August 31st expiration?
Yeah, for summer school. So yes, this summer.
Okay, now I have a clarifying questions.
Go for it.
There's indoor summer band camp at the middle school, as far as I know. Is that summer school?
Yes, but they've been wearing masks now. They have their flute covers and their trumpet things. Trumpet mask. Trumpet masks.
Do you want to restate your motion one more time and make sure Mr. Hanna agrees, since it has changed several times?
Not very long too.
Okay. that K-8 students who are participating indoor for summer school or, summer camps are required to wear masks.
Do you still second? Motion made by Jessica, seconded by Jeff. Is there any further discussion? Turning to the motion on the floor, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
No.
Motion carries with 2 dissents. Item 7I, consider.
Hold on, can we go back to H though real quick? So we haven't talked about high school. So I would make a motion that high school students that are vaccinated would not need to wear masks during the summer school duration. Summer event duration, whatever yours is for high school, but they don't need to wear masks if they're vaccinated.
Second. One moment. Leah's made a motion that high school students that are vaccinated do not need to wear masks for summer programming. And Mrs. Rothermer has seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Item 7I. Consider alteration to the gradual reopening plan, staff masking indoors when students are not present, summer 2021. Dr. Salerno, any updates here?
This is a conversation I've been having with several staff over the course of the past few weeks. And we recognize and our staff recognized we'll wear our masks until the kids leave, but several are asking if they could make their own decision about masking when students aren't present. So for example, maybe I'm planning in my classroom or I'm working in a workshop and it's only me. And I'm vaccinated and kids aren't present, then I could take off my mask. If I'm working with a colleague who's been vaccinated and we're maintaining a good distance with one another, and if we felt comfortable taking off our mask. And so wanted to bring this before the board as it is a recommendation still of Public Health Madison-Dane County to continue to mask and physically distance in our schools, even for adults.
Dr. Salerno, is it possible to have, signs put in the buildings where appropriate that, masks are not required, but if you are not vaccinated, we recommend, or something to that? I've seen masks similar to that, not exactly the ones that you put, because the ones you put said like, if you're comfortable, ask the staff member to put their mask on, but more just if you're vaccinated, it's not required, but if you're unvaccinated, you may want to consider putting on a mask.
Yes, we can adapt the one that you see inside the board docs under letter H. It's an optional mask, I think is what I hear you saying, and we'd be happy to adapt that.
I guess this is a point of parliamentary inquiry. Because of the way that the agenda is written, are we only permitted to take action on the question of when students are not present, as opposed to when students are present?
That is
why was that done?
That's my mistake, Rod. When I suggested that this be added to the agenda, I didn't phrase it correctly. I own that. I apologize.
Discussing for item 7I.
So what's going to happen with staff? I mean, I guess they fall back to whether or not there's a requirement to wear a mask or not, right? With when students are present. Right? I mean, that's what they fall back to, right?
Delegate the decision to the superintendent.
I'm comfortable with that.
If there's no further comments, someone can entertain a motion.
How to word word said motion, but, so bear with me. I would make a motion that staff, when indoors, do not need to wear a mask when students are not present. They're fully vaccinated.
Second that.
Motion made by Leah, seconded by Jessica for staff to discontinue masking indoors when students are not present if staff are vaccinated summer 2021. Further discussion?
So clarifying question to Leah's motion. If an adult teacher supervisor is vaccinated and children are present, that individual still has to wear a mask.
Would, the way that this is worded in the agenda, we can't word it any other way, really, so.
Yeah, we can't take up that issue.
So, yes.
But one of these days, we're gonna get to the gradual reopening. So, at any rate.
Back to the motion on the floor. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Will say nay. Passes. Staff to discontinue masking indoors when students are not present if vaccinated summer 2021. Item 7J, consider alterations to the gradual reopening plan, community organizations' use of facilities during the summer of 2021. Dr. Salerno, additional comments for our consideration?
At this point, we don't have any requests from outside partners to use our facilities. And I mean here adults who come in to use maybe our weight room or play a game of pickup basketball on a Sunday night. But I anticipate the request is going to come down the pike. And as you know, we've already approved the students' use through Park and Rec, those kinds of activities. But this is explicitly for adults, community organizations. Is the board interested in opening up the use of facilities this summer? Should we be asked?
Questions or comments?
What will the masking requirements of adults, non-staff adults, be in our facilities during the summer?
I presume that would.
Are we going to require
the form of a motion for?
What's that?
I presume that would be answered in the form of the motion that's presented.
I was wondering what people think. I mean, okay, fine.
I mean, my thought would be something similar to what we've already said. Vaccinated adults are not required to wear a mask, but we recommend that non-vaccinated adults wear a mask when in our buildings. Salerno, can I ask, when, say, the rec department is using the facilities, do we have a requirement? Do we have additional custodial requirements that we have to use now, or what's the impact cost-wise when we do that right now?
The impact cost-wise? Yeah, we will always continue to do the cleaning of the balls and cleaning of the bleachers and those kinds of things as we have been doing. In terms of having a custodian present, not necessarily. If it's a large gathering, then we would ask to have a custodian present to take care of restrooms and things like that. But usually it's some of our staff members are participating in the ball game. So it's not uncommon for them to help out if there's an issue.
I know, like, as an individual, when I've rented like the gym space for a birthday party, I do get charged for a custodian for the cleanup and stuff. So I imagine we would recoup some of our cleaning costs that way.
Yeah, with Parks and Rec, you might remember the board entered into a nice arrangement with our village counterparts that it's a very nominal fee, like $5 or something. But you're right, if a family wants to use our facilities, then there is that fee, you're right.
Would anyone like to propose a motion for item 7J?
I have another quick question. If we were to, because we basically kind of suspended this policy, so if we were to basically unsuspend it, that doesn't limit, we could have, a basketball tournament in here with hundreds of people. Like, so I don't know that basketball's having tournaments, but I don't know how to feel about it. I don't know what everybody else's kind of thoughts are. That's almost, I feel like I'd be okay with it on a small scale, but I don't know about just opening it back up. I don't know.
I think these are community organizations, and I think we're at the point in the sort of in a transition point in terms of the pandemic. And now I think what people are going to have to do is they're going to have to begin assessing their own risk, mask or not, in situations like that. That shouldn't stop us from opening up the gym to even, to a large group of people. Because I think what we have to fall back on is, in addition to the science, is we're adults. We've been through the last year and 14 months, and by now we should know what the risk is, right, or not, and we need to be able to think through those things by ourselves, and that shouldn't prevent other people who want to do those things from doing those things.
Yeah, this says specifically during the summer of 2021. So are there, I don't know the answer to this, are there large basketball tournaments or other large activities that happen over the summertime? Or are we thinking more like rec and fitness class comes over, or, yes, there's a basketball league, but it's 20 people, not 200. I don't know. Like, is it likely that we're going to have a huge event this summer?
Great question. At this point, we have no one requesting the use of our facilities for adults from outside groups. Have we had them in the past? It's been mostly student focused. This might just be a smattering of folks who just want to use the weight room or, like I say, play a game at the IC on Sunday night.
But in this instance, I do agree with what Mr. Heiss said, in that, we're not talking about remedial summer school students that we just need to sweep away all barriers for you to come back and please learn and pick up. This would be optional events, I presume. You have free choice to attend a tournament or not. So I'm pretty comfortable with this proposal. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'm happy to entertain a motion at this time.
So I'll make a motion that we allow community organizations to use our facilities during the summer of 2021.
Second.
Diana has made a motion, seconded by Jeff, for the community to use our facilities during the summer of 2021. Further discussion?
Where do we land with masks with that?
If you want me to add that to the motion, I would say that masks are recommended but not required for those who are fully vaccinated.
Are you comfortable with that? Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay.
No.
Motion passes for the community to continue using our facilities this summer. Item 8, our last time for citizen comments this evening. Those wishing to speak should text their first name, last name, and address to 608-250-9166. Again, that number is 608-250-9166. Do you have any citizens signed up at this time? Second call for citizens comments, 608-250-9166. Last call for citizen comments. On to item 9, future agenda items are presented. Would anyone like to make a request at this time?
No, you and I have had a conversation, and I shouldn't have been such a smart aleck earlier.
I appreciate our friendship, Brett. Item 10, our schedule of next meetings is presented. Please note, as Leah had mentioned, the joint education and school meeting on July 6th. Shelby, anything else of note? Thank you. Item 11, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Leah's made a motion and Diana seconded to adjourn this June 7th regular meeting of the Board of Education. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Say nay. We are adjourned.
Think of it all. Sorry about that.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing before I forget.
Well, and look, all these last pages, they're all basically the same.
So you're when I was